when it comes to what we're talking about today, I want everybody to understand that it's not my job to belittle or berate you. I've been teaching for 8 years. It's my job to help you in any way that I can. And if you have any questions at all, please just let me know by either raising your hand on Zoom, because I'll have you in grid view, or just try to catch my attention in any way that you can. But if you're not comfortable with me seeing your faces during the class, that's absolutely okay. But it does help me to gauge your reactions and understand if anybody's confused with anything by showing me your face, like making sure that your camera is on. It's okay if you're muted. It's just that it does help if your camera's on. If you don't want to do that, that's okay too. So I'm going to go over to the gallery view. Here we are. So we've got a good number of people here, and there's, geez, 2 pages worth of people. No cameras though, just everybody listening. So this is kind of like a podcast, I guess. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions at all? No? Kamish Malecki, also known as Nancy Malecki, how are you? Yeah, no one has any questions? Okay. Well, if you guys aren't going to interact, I'm going to make you uncomfortable enough to interact at some point with me. So let's get down to it. So today, since we're talking about photo first, the technical aspects, is anybody here not familiar with how a camera essentially works and what kinds of cameras there are in the world? Anybody not know? No response. Okay, we're just going to go over it then. So what I primarily use whenever shooting is a DSLR camera. Okay, that's digital single lens reflex camera. Okay, so one lens is on the camera. Just removed one lens. That's the single lens portion. Okay, this camera is commonly used by photographers because you can look through a viewfinder that is closed off in a prism, and that allows you to meter your subject matter as well as get a good, nice, focused view on your subject without having any other distraction on the outside, unless you're keeping your outside eye open. I generally like to use this type of camera just because I like the body. I like the ergonomics of the camera. I like the fact that I get to use a full frame camera that is relatively, like, it's not compact, but it's not absolutely disgustingly huge. I usually shoot with the D810, the Nikon D810 and the Nikon D750. And those are favorites of mine just because user friendliness as well as quality of image. I do have a whole set of Nikon lenses that are, that I can pair with this camera, especially older Nikon lenses. But this is one of the cameras that I use, and this is called a digital SLR or DSLR camera. But the second camera that I use is a Fujifilm X Pro 3. And the reason why I really love using this camera is because it's compactability. The fact that it's rangefinder styled, so I could pay attention to everything that's going on around my scene while making photographs of subjects. And also it's pretty much like looking through a window whenever I'm making an image. If anybody's familiar with Leica rangefinder cameras, or like Voigtlander rangefinder cameras, is pretty much like that. It's built really beautifully, titanium alloy body, scratch proof. I don't have to worry about dinging it every time I take it around on my adventures. And it's very light, very inconspicuous. So anytime that I want to make a photograph of an individual or a group of individuals, if I want to keep that pretty secretive, then I can do that. But usually whenever making my photographs, I'm talking to people. That's something that I really like to do, and I do respect people's privacy, unless the image is just so beautiful that you don't want to interrupt what's going on. So usually I'm building rapport with my subject matter, but if I'm trying to shoot while on the fly, then I'll usually use this X Pro 3. And this has kind of changed the way that I've shot. We're going to be talking about this a little bit more later. But continuing on with like technical aspects of photography, let's talk about shutter speed. Now, for those of you that aren't really familiar with shutter speed is the speed at which your shutter opens and closes, controlling the action of your photograph as well as the amount of light let in through the camera body. Now, what does that mean? Like, what the hell does that mean? Essentially, shutter speed controlling the action means that you are controlling the range of motion that your subjects have within your frame. So anytime that you want to make an image of someone that's running past you and you want to get that motion blur, that has to do with shutter speed. Okay. If you want to freeze frame your subjects, that also has to do with shutter speed. Anytime that you have someone clapping and you want to catch mid-clap, that has to do with shutter speed. Faster shutter speeds mean quicker action capture. Slower shutter speeds means that you're going to get more of that motion blur, sort of like what you're seeing on this camera right now. Okay. Now, aside from shutter speed, we also have aperture. Okay. Or you can call it depth of field, if you'd like to. When it comes to aperture or depth of field, aperture is essentially the size of the opening within the diaphragm of the lens. Okay. It's essentially controlling how much light you're letting in through your lens, as well as how much focus you have throughout your whole image. okay? Goes through plane of focus. And I'm trying to make this as simple as possible without taking up too much time on talking about the technical aspects. But again, aperture controls how much you have in focus. Now, what does that mean? If I'm making an image of a subject that's in the foreground being very close to my lens, okay? I want to make a photograph of my hand, let's say. If you want to make a photograph of my hand while blurring me out, that has to do with aperture, okay? The lower the number, the shallower the depth of field, meaning that if you're focusing on my hand, I will be out of focus. So what does that mean for the camera that we have here right now? My hand is pretty much in focus as far as I can tell on this camera. So you have a very deep depth of field, meaning that your aperture number that you're using is large. So it's, let's just go with 2 apertures just to keep it quick. F2 is a shallow depth of field. F8 is a very deep depth of field. There's more resolved in the image. So this is closer to, let's say, an F8 than it is an F2 right now from what I can tell. From what I can tell, this is pretty much in focus. You could see like the wrinkles on my fingers and such, okay? Is everybody understanding that just fine? Because I'm going through the technical aspects very quickly. Yeah, everybody's good? I see a lot of thumbs up. It's good, okay, good. Now, aside from shutter speed, aperture, we also have ISO, and these 3 things make up what's called the exposure triangle. Now, ISO is essentially the light sensitivity of your camera at the time. When it was with film, it was the film speed or how sensitive your film was to light at a given time whenever you're using it. But the issue with using different ISO films is that, let's say you're a photographer that shoots around all day. If you're not carrying multiple camera bodies around with you and you just have a 100 ISO film in your camera for the day and you haven't shot it through, then you have to spool up that roll of film before you switch out your film to a higher ISO, let's say ISO 800, when the light is getting lower. That can be kind of a nuisance. So why not carry like more than 1 camera body on you? Well, now that you're carrying more than 1 camera body on you, you have to worry about weight, okay? That's where digital comes in. And digital makes that all simpler. Essentially, I could change my ISO directly in camera. I don't have to worry about having to switch out film. So we have our shutter speed, our aperture, and our ISO, and those are the technical, like 3 technical aspects of exposure that we want to talk about today. We're going to be talking about a lot. Now with digital, you can change that right all on the camera, which makes it worthwhile, makes it fun. I love messing around with film, but at the same time, digital has made things a lot easier in making photographs. But now this is where we start getting into the fun part of this class or this seminar. And this is the part that I really like talking about. And this is why I also would love it if you guys would engage with me every once in a while. This is where we get into the philosophical aspect. Because when it comes to making photographs on digital, it's all fun. But with film, there was something special. And what I believe was special about film, especially when I was shooting in film, is the different film stocks that you could choose, as well as the type of quality that you have in each film stock, and the amount of patience and time you have to take in order to make your photograph right. Making sure that everything is right in camera is something that we try to go by as photographers, as professional photographers, okay? Well, I'm not even gonna use that professional photographer's bit. Like as a photographer, you wanna try to get it right within the camera because it makes it a hell of a lot easier on you later, and it also makes you a better photographer, I assure you. The reason why I say that is because if you're attempting to get things right in camera the first time around, you don't have to worry about messing around with the image to make it what you thought it should have been when you were initially taking the picture or capturing your subject matter, all right? So we try to get it right in the camera. And when we're trying to get it right in the camera, we're trying to make sure that we have at least a normal exposure or the exposure that you think is aesthetically pleasing for your eye, okay? Remember, you're the artist here too. It's not, oops, I almost lost you guys. It's not so much about what the viewer wants as it is about what you want and what you think is important to depict, okay? So as a documentary portrait photographer, I enjoy people. We've already established this. So what do I usually look for whenever I'm making photographs of people? I look for something intriguing. I look for something that's delightful and attractive. I know that when it comes to teaching these classes, I run the risk of sounding like someone who may be sort of creepy just because I love people so much. But the thing is that when it comes to people, there is nothing more beautiful than finding an individual that you think somehow can captivate others and can also establish a story. The power of photography is that when an individual looks at an image, they usually, because it's part of human nature, make an assumption almost directly. But if you provide an image that has enough of a background and a story that is captivating and also, how do I put this? Also spiritually effective, I mean, now you have something that people are going to be guessing over throughout the time that they're looking at that image. So I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to bring up my website. Let's do this. Make sure I'm in here. All right. Let's go here. Sorry, guys. Hold on one second. Okay. Can everybody see this? Everybody hear me? Yeah, you guys can see this just fine? Okay. All right, so.
Maybe scroll up just a tad.
How's that?
Yeah, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, okay, cool. So these are some of my photographs, and I don't know if you guys got a chance to check these out before the class started. But these are the individuals that I decided were intriguing enough to make an image of, right? And, you know, obviously there's gonna be some people that are missing from this because I don't post all of my images. But let's go over a couple of these, and let's go over how they mesh with composition, and also what these images mean to me, and how to establish and build rapport with subject matter, as well as how to be, you don't necessarily have to be a people person. You don't have to be an extrovert, but it does help in knowing how to interact with people in order to make photographs. It does help. Doesn't exactly mean that it's going to make you the best photographer in the world, but if you want to make pictures of people, it can help. So let's go over this one. Can one of you tell me what's going on in the image? Again, if you guys want to unmute yourselves, you can at any point. Go ahead, somebody. How about I call on one of you? Yeah, I'll do that instead. Yeah, you guys effed up now. Megan Stolt. Okay, tell me what's going on in this image.
Okay, well, the one side of the room looks a little lighter and the other side a little darker.
Okay.
That's just me.
Okay. What do you think that might be?
Well, for one, the light in the picture, it's kind of casting down more light on the guy than it is on the other side of the room. Good.
Okay. And what do you see? What else do you see? Tell me everything that you see in the image.
Okay, I see the car.
Okay.
The guy sitting down, and everything else in the garage.
Okay, good. All right, and let's go with a second person. How about Daniel Dubnicki?
Yeah, it looks like he's looking down and maybe reading something, and you're trying to capture maybe just what's going on in his mind. You know, it looks like he's kind of deep in thought or pensive or thinking about something as he has this car sitting there. I can't tell if the car is like up on blocks or a lift or something, but maybe he's trying to repair the car, and I don't know exactly what's going on, but
it's okay. Are you looking at it on your phone?
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to squint here.
So to give you guys an idea of what's going on here, this man's name is Jim. I made this photograph in 2013, I believe. Jim is an auto shop owner in the Cobblestone District downtown. And this image is of him reading in the middle of the night. This is about, I believe, 11 p.m. or 12 a.m. When I was walking around in the Cobblestone District. And he's reading in his garage next to a car that he was repairing. All right. Now, the reason why I picked Jim for this particular photograph is because, number one, when you're walking around at 12 o'clock at night, or like 12 a.m., basically you're looking for things that are pretty interesting that are going on at nighttime having to do with people. And Jim was just sitting there silently reading to himself, which is, I mean, kind of eerie in a lot of ways, but at the same time, very intriguing. For this particular photograph, does everybody see how I've included a lot of the garage door, the garage way that's around Jim? This is called framing, okay? It's a compositional element called framing. And what I'm doing here is ensuring that I'm including some of the environment for you, the viewer, to match with my subject and what's happening with my subject. That way you're getting a little bit more of a story to the image, okay? Instead of just having a picture of Jim with, you know, the bounding box of the garage door and only the garage door, wouldn't that give me a completely different image altogether?
Yeah.
I mean, now that I've decided to use that garage way with some of the sidewalk, it's giving you a little bit more room to understand the environment, almost as if you're there looking at this happening directly in front of you. It's not giving you as much of a story if I've decided to crop that in to just the garage doorway instead of the whole door, the doors themselves, and the sidewalk inclusion, okay? So when it comes to trying to make sure that your viewer is being directed towards your subject, use compositional elements, one of those having to be framing, okay? Let's go to another image. How about this one right here? What's happening here? How about we call on somebody else? Kamish. Go ahead.
How dare you?
Yeah. You get.
So it's a young boy sitting in his doorway, and I like the edge of the house here on the right, you know, gives me a distance that I'm standing from him, and the perspective of that siding, and a bit of framing, as you mentioned, is going on as well.
Right. And where's the framing?
What I mean, the door frame is obvious, but I would
Perfect.
still say, oh, okay. I
I'm
would
sorry,
still
no,
say
go
the
ahead if you want
siding
to-
is, I would say the siding as well.
Okay. Now, in this photograph, we have perspective, which is such an important element of composition that you should always keep in mind. Perspective, as well as leading line and framing. Okay. Now, color also plays a role in this too. The reason being is because there's a little bit more of a purplish hue, like a magenta-ish hue, that is present within the grays of this photograph. That goes very well with that green that we have on the outer edge of the door frame. All right, that trim. So when we're looking at this image, we have to keep in mind perspective, because I'm not exactly completely lined up with the young boy that is in the frame. I'm not facing him dead on. I inched a little bit closer towards that wall instead of being dead on with him or squared up. And when it comes to leading line, it's not a perfect leading line that is in the most traditional example of being like a 45-degree angle off the corner of the photograph, but our leading lines are in our siding, okay? Leading lines in our siding that leads us to our subject matter. Now, for those of you who are wondering what leading line is, a leading line is any line that directs you to the subject, okay? It's a line that serves as a visual marker for the viewer that's going to lead them directly to the subject, allowing for a little bit more understanding towards what's going on in terms of movement of the image, okay? Let's go with another photo.
Vicente, I just wanted to
Fine.
jump in on that one.
Please, yes. Let's
So,
see.
so the two things, certainly the color, the contrast between that mustard green, yellow, and the blue of the siding, but then also just the slightly off angle of everything. So the stairs are slightly bent. The the one mailbox is off kilter. The door is open, so that creates a couple of other off angles. And then the way the boy's leaning, he's also sort of like, he's got a little bit of a lean to the side there. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to all the things that are working well together in this image, does everybody have any like questions or comments on this at all? Remember, it's okay to talk. And the thing is that even though we only have an hour, if you guys want to extend past that, we can do that. An hour is kind of a short amount of time, and I want to make sure that everybody gets in all the questions that they have. Okay. So let's go to the next image. Not that one. That's not one. Not as interesting to me. For a class, let's go with, how about, hey, Rick Smith? No. Okay, yeah, let's go with this one. Let's talk about this. Does anybody have any comments about this image before we get started on it? Anyone at all?
All the faces are in shadow.
Yes. One of my favorite things about it. What else?
You got intersecting diagonal lines that are parallel. The horse's neck and the horse's face go down to the right. The other horse's face and the woman's face point down to the left, and they, cross over each other in the middle.
I love the positioning of this. Like one is going one way, the other's going the other. Like I love the fact that everybody's pretty much looking in a different direction. But a lot of diagonal lines here, a lot of line altogether. So this is an image of Corky, Hearts of Fire, and I forget the second horse's name. Now Corky is the woman's name and Hearts of Fire is the white horse that we have here. The brown horse I don't remember. But this image was made in a stable in, is it Akron, New York? I believe it's Akron, New York. But how did this image come to be? Well, number one, when it comes to patience, and also you could say a little bit of the Henri Cartier-Bresson theory of like the decisive moment, thinking and making sure that you're looking at everything that's going on to catch an ephemeral moment, making sure that, whatever's happening spontaneously, you are trying to capture as is in order to epitomize what you have directly in front of you. I waited for about, I'd say a good five whole minutes to make this image because the horses were moving every which way that they wanted to, and you just have to wait for that perfect positioning that works for you. In this image, I made sure to have, complete heads of horses, ears, the snout of the horse like facing in one direction off to the corner. This one is breaching that midpoint that would pretty much be empty or open if that horse wasn't there, and then Corky being framed beautifully by that doorway, especially that broken piece of the door that's in that upper section. Now, all the faces are in shadow. That's another thing that I enjoyed about this image. This image was naturally contrasty. There is a lot of highlight, a lot of shadow here. But what I love even more than just everything that works in terms of the compositional aspect of this image is the story behind it. So what I was talking about earlier when it came to building rapport with subject matter and the philosophy of image making, for those of you that aren't exactly looking to make images of people, well, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But one thing that I could say translates between making images of people or just inanimate objects, like settings or places, everything that translates within, the one thing that translates within that, not everything, but the one thing that translates within that is risk. And the reason why I mention that is because when making this image or when deciding to make this image, I was just driving for the whole day in the fall. I just decided that I was going to take a drive around Western New York State, and I happened upon a horse farm, like a horse stable. There was this big open piece of land that I saw horses like galloping in, and I thought, this is attached to a home and this place looks kind of inviting for whatever reason. I'm going to go up to the door and I'm going to ask if I could make some photographs of these horses. So what did I do? It's in the evening, like it's around, I think 5 o'clock in the evening during the fall. I decided to drive up the driveway and go up to the door, the entrance of the house, and I knocked on the door, and Corky answered, and I asked, hey, would you be okay with me making some photographs of your horses as well as you? Because I think this is a really beautiful place, and for some reason I want to get some images of this. And she was more than delighted. So she takes me through the whole stable, and I get to meet all these beautiful horses, and she gets to show me her favorites, some that don't belong to her, some that like she boards at the stables, and the two that do belong to her, these two right here. And she had such a wonderful energy, especially around these horses, and such a good rapport with them, you know, that they were so steady and so calm around her. And she said that usually, you know, they're kind of sketchy around other people, but around me, for some reason, they were very calm. And I thought that added to the beauty of the moment. So I decided to make some photographs as Corky was just giving one of them a little snack, the little one that's there. And this is one of the images that came out of it. The reason why I mention risk, or like when it comes to my philosophy of making photographs, trying to build relationships and risk, is that even though you can be a really good technical photographer, which is, I mean, I come across lots of really good technical photographers, people who are really good at knowing exactly how to work the highlights and the shadows in every photo that they make, how to adjust for exposure every single time that, you know, they lift up their camera. Those are all very small pieces of making a good image in my mind. And the reason being is because even though you should be getting it right in camera, being a good technical photographer doesn't exactly make you a great photographer or even a great people photographer. what does make you a good people photographer is risk and rapport, respect, as well as adventure, like a sense of adventure. And the reason why I say that is because when it comes to people, you're going to meet, you can meet 100 new people a day that are going to give you 100 different reactions to whatever you're asking them for in terms of making images. So when it comes to a situation where if you are someone who is focusing on their photography for a lifetime or even just for the day, if you come across a situation or a settings, like somewhere that includes what you want within an image, within your dream image, and something inside of you says, I should probably stop right here, then you should stop. I mean, I've even gotten in trouble at Delaware Camera a couple of times for situations where I've come in late because I told Mark I had to stop and make a picture of a person that I saw, you know? And that's what I think it takes to be a good photographer, the willingness to decide that for that moment, you're going to concentrate on just this one thing, this one picture, this one environment, this one person. So instead of talking too much about the technical aspect, let's get into the philosophical aspect a little bit deeper, as well as compositional. So this is one of my favorite images that I've made as of late.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead. Is it
How
Mark?
much, Chris?
Oh, Chris, I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't see that.
How much of your credentials, experience, what do you offer to the person, Corky in that particular example, to put them initially at ease with you coming with a camera and seeking their trust?
Fantastic.
Because I don't have any credentials. I have a hobby and an interest, and I'm okay with people, but you know, there's I've tried you know, different scenarios. I don't lie, but at the same time, I'm not very confident because I'm a beginning photographer and I don't really have a lot to offer. And I live in New York, and you know, the city folk are you know, like you said, 100 different people, 100 different responses. But I was just curious what you do.
So okay, you live in New York City?
On Long Island.
Okay, Long Island. Okay. All right. So, hey, Steven, before I answer that, is it okay to curse during this? Because I'm trying to be real here.
I stated yesterday to somebody, personally, I try and reserve the curse so that it has impact when I do.
Yes.
So if it's required and you need the impact, I'm okay with it.
Yes. So this is not going to be an F-bomb, just so everybody knows. Okay, this is like general cursing. If anybody has a problem with that, I'm really sorry, and I will write a letter to you after this. I promise you. But okay, so when it comes to that, it is like that is a tough hurdle to get over because it's tough shit. Like, and I don't mean that as in like it's tough shit to you, like tough shit, you can't do that. What I mean is when it comes to credentials, the one thing that I do advise is being as honest as possible, like as honest as you can and as open as you can whenever you're making an image of someone and you want that bridge to be there, that bridge of trust and respect. Let's go with two like polar opposite styles of photography. And one specifically that you may be interested in when it comes to being in Long Island. So there's street photography, okay, especially when it comes to like people, street photography with people. And then there is, you know, documentary style portrait photography where I'm doing this with individuals, but I'm building rapport. So I do street photography every once in a while, but it is not my favorite style. So when it comes to building a relationship with an individual, the first thing that I always come off with, even if I didn't have the credentials that I do, and I understand that I'm not trying to sound arrogant, but I understand that I am good at talking to people. But even if I didn't have the credentials that I do, the first thing that I always do whenever I'm about to make an image of someone, I go like up to them with my hands usually up in a place that they don't feel threatened. And I go, hey, I'm really sorry to bother you. I just wanted to know if it would be all right by you if I could make a portrait photograph of you. And then I give my credentials. But if you don't have those credentials, you can say, hey, I'm very new at this. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Chris. I want to make a portrait photograph of you. I am a photographer, but I am trying to get a little bit more used to talking to people and making images of them as we go along. I didn't want you to be freaked out. I wanted to make sure that I got you. So if you ask for permission and you're honest, as soon as you come up to an individual and you're making sure that you are as non-threatening as possible while being disarming, because you are being kind, you're being courteous, you're respecting a boundary, and you are also asking for permission, that will work better in your favor, in my opinion. Now, the thing that I've been preparing for, and this is the funny part about this, I've been failing at shit since I was like 12 or 13. I have failed at so many things in my life, and I mean so many things in my life. But the one thing that I'm really good at is taking rejection because of that failure. So anytime that someone just tells me no, like, no, I'm not interested, no, not right now, or maybe some other time, or even like, get the hell out of here, like, I don't want to talk to you, you just take it as it is what it is. Like, someone says no, they don't want me to make their photograph, that's okay. But the cool thing about this is that I assure you, if you ask 20 people within the day in the way that I just told you, if you can make their photograph, at least one of them will allow you to make a good photograph of it. Okay. And if you take your time with that person while still giving direction, they're going to respect you even more, and you're going to get a good photograph.
Thank you.
The one thing that I'd always suggest is making sure that you are taking your time as long as the person allots you that time. So if you're taking your time, that image is going to come out much better. And if you build rapport with an individual, in my experience, the image always comes out 1,000 times better. I love the images that I end up making after I've spoken to someone for 15, 20 minutes with the intention of only being around them for 5. You know, this individual right here, D, I spoke to him for a good 10, 15 minutes, and how that conversation started was I got out of my car because I saw that the light was getting low. See how we have those golden rays in that top right-hand corner? So the light was getting low. I got out of my car with my camera to try to make some pictures. And he's the first person that talked to me as soon as I got out of my car in my neighborhood. I've never seen him before in my life. And when I got out of my car, he goes, "Hey man, how's it going?" No reason. He just said hi to me, and he kept on walking. And I was like, "It's going pretty good. How are you, man?" And he goes, "I'm pretty good. How's your day going?" And we started a conversation from there. From there, he told me that he's an addict, or he's like a recovering addict. He's been making sure to go to his meetings I think it's every week, he was stating, that he makes sure that he does his prayers every week, make sure that he greets people. And we had this wonderful conversation the whole way through. But the one thing that he made sure was, don't make me look stupid in this photo. And I was like, you got it. Like, I won't make you look stupid. Like, however you want to look, I'll make you look. And he gave me this look, and I made a photograph of him. You know, so.
Did you show it to him?
What was that?
Did you show it back to him for approval?
Yeah, so I take, usually people give me their information after I ask for it. Some people don't really want to, and that's okay too. But yeah, like, I took down his information, and that's how you stay in touch.
I was wondering about the back of the camera, just showing him your LCD.
Oh, the photo? Yeah, he got to see the photo. Yeah, that time too. Yes, yeah, he got to see the photo. But usually I take someone's email address down, and that's great that you asked that too, because I always carry my notepad with me and a pen. I always have at least one notepad in all of my photo bags, just in case I'm using a different camera or like different equipment for the day. And I fill it up with every person that I've ever made a photograph of. Like, all these pages are filled. So I always make sure to take notes about the moment, about the person, where I photographed them, and that way I could tell a better story.
About releases.
Oh, now when it comes to photo releases, you only need photo releases if you're making photographs of people in an area that isn't public, or if you are deciding that you're going to be using that image for marketing. That's as far as I know. But whenever it comes to making an image that I'm going to be putting in a book, let's say, no, you don't need a release.
How about an image of this gentleman? Would you need it for this use?
Nope. Nope. But at the same time, I always make sure that I have permission to put this on my website after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's not completely true. And the reason why I say that is because there have been situations where I've made photographs of individuals that didn't know that I was making a photograph of them, and that's where the street photography sort of mentality comes through. And those images are just, maybe it seems wrong, and if it does, please tell me. But at the same time, those images are just so beautiful to me that, you know, it's like you can't ruin that moment. You don't want to interrupt that. There are some really beautiful images that I've made that are sort of like think pictures, because here, let me find one for you. Find it right away. Can you guys still see my screen?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. There it goes. Can you guys see that just fine?
Just fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys tell me what's going on here? And if you're looking on a phone, I'm sorry, it might be a little hard to see.
You can still zoom in on the phone.
Can you guys see me zooming in now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
No, I'm saying we can zoom in on the phone as well,
Oh.
just by pinching. So no
Okay.
worries.
So this image was kind of funny to make. And I don't mean like I was laughing across the street, but it was funny in the way that it made me uncomfortable. At the same time, it was surrounded by lots of beauty. So this is in New Orleans, and this is on San Luis Street. These two are talking, but if you notice, there's only one individual really talking here based on the, based on the look of my subjects. He was talking to her for a good 10, 15 minutes, and she wasn't listening to a word that he was saying. At least that's what it looked like from a distance. Okay? And that's when I just decided to position myself across the street, just like waiting for something interesting to happen. And I noticed that I'm hearing this man's voice, but I'm not really hearing too much of a response from her the whole way through. So when I got a chance, I made a photograph, and she looks bored out of her mind while, you know, he is talking to her. Even his body, you know, his body positioning, like his body language is telling you that he's in mid-thought, you know, mid-speak. And her body language is saying she's somewhere else mentally. She's checked out, you know. At the same time, it's being framed the way that, you know, I positioned myself. I made sure that I had every aspect of the street and also the balcony depicted and represented in the photo, to give you a good understanding of where I am. Even if I didn't tell you that I was in New Orleans, you could probably tell that I was in a place of some sort of Spanish or French influence. Okay.
That was say.
What was that?
That's what I was going to say.
Nice. Okay, good. See, it's about being really good and observant whenever looking at an image. Like you should be looking at all the detail that's given to you to try to understand exactly what's going on. And when it comes to the setting that we have here, yeah, most of you can probably tell that this is Spanish or French influence. Okay.
Is it okay to offset a picture once in a while?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
they're not centered?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I encourage that. I encourage that completely. Here, let's look at another one. Hold on. So you want to see an offset picture? You got it.
So that couple never knew you took the picture.
No. And I didn't want to go over there and bother them with that either, because if this is some kind of conversation that, you know, they really didn't want anybody else getting in on at all, I'm not there to, you know, to piss them off further. In my mind, and also if you look at the work of, if you guys have to write this down, please do, but if you look at the work of Steve McCurry, David Allen Harvey, who's one of my absolute favorite photographers, William Albert Allard, those are all people that, you know, before street photography was called street photography, these are people who contributed to that look, you know, but also doing that while traveling. So making images that are very much spontaneous while being colorful as well as vibrant and moving. You know, these are images that really depict an action. So yeah, I didn't want to mess with that in that moment. What was the image that I was going to show you guys? Yeah, walking into a barbershop. You know, just deciding to walk into a barbershop on the west side of Buffalo and then making a photograph of a man getting his hair done. Especially in that beautiful golden light, you could see the golden tips that he has in his braids, if you look carefully. That red that's there really goes beautifully with the gold that's coming in through the window.
Yeah.
Right?
Vicente, when you're shooting, what's your intended output?
What do you mean?
Like, so is it viewing on a screen? Is it viewing a print? Is it viewing a big print? Like,
oh, viewing a print. Like,
yeah.
When it comes to looking at it on the web, every once in a while I mess up with like the quality that I should be putting it on the web as. But to me, it's about the print, because when I print it later, that's exactly what means everything to me. This is to give people a good representation of how I shoot. But yeah, print always.
And how big?
Oh man, hold on. Are you guys okay with me stepping away for a second? Because it's not just a question of like, I want to answer with like, yeah, 20 by 24. Hold on. Pull this off my wall. So to answer your question, Linda, and also to show you like output, when it comes to making an image, is it okay to make sure that it's off center? Yeah, absolutely. As long as, I'd say, try to pay attention to the flow of your subject matter, meaning how is your subject moving and where are they going to end up within that image. Not just like for the moment that you decide to press down on the shutter release and then the image is made, but mentally, if your viewer is looking at your picture, is there space? Is there room for your subject to move into? Is that negative space about to be taken up at some point,
Okay.
flowing into that? It's absolutely fine to make sure that your subjects aren't on, on that center, like within that center third. But just try to be careful about how you make images like that. If you are curating and making all of your images to be completely off kilter, that's awesome. Because now you have a whole series of images that are off kilter that are going to make you feel uncomfortable as the viewer. But if you have a whole bunch of images that, like if you have some images that are off kilter, and then a lot of them that are directly in the center, it kind of looks odd. Make sure that it's a curated approach to how you're making your images. But that picture of the man that's sitting in the barber chair, that's off center. This one of this guy, even though he's in that center third, he's in the left portion of the center third.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah,
just
I like
because
it.
it works out that way.
Are you shooting to crop at all?
I try not to. Like one of the things that I try not to do is get everything that I want within my frame in there the first time around.
So you're not worried about
And
aspect
again, when it comes to printing, no, I make sure that I'm always like pretty much printing in that 2 to 3 or 3 to 2. Sorry. So I'm sorry, is it 2 to 3? Is that what I'm thinking of? Steven.
Yes, 4 by 6.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Okay, good. Okay,
2, 3.
So when it comes to that output as well, this is a medium-sized image, right? And I'm 5'7". It's a little bit shorter than I am. So this is a medium-sized image. I usually like to print really big, especially if I'm hanging something up in my home. And it may be weird, but this is how much I love making pictures of people. I like having really large images of an individual because I want to be able to tell their expression as well as the texture that's on their face or a jacket that they're wearing. I want to be able to see all of that. It should be like looking at a person. That's how I look at it, or looking at a moment directly as it's happening in front of you. Okay.
So you're not post-processing to hide any of their realities?
No, not really. No. In fact, when it comes to post-processing, it's not like I really remove anything from the individual. The most that I do is I try to highlight or bring out any of the pieces of that person that I find so beautiful. A lot of the time it's eyes. Sometimes it's accessories. For example, this man right here.
I have a quick question. Are you directing them for the facial expressions, or that just naturally you're just capturing at those moments?
Most of the time, to be pretty honest, most of the time they're just giving me a facial expression that's neutral, and I tell them to like tip their head a little bit more so it doesn't seem so awkward. There's a difference between having someone that's like looking at you like this, see how awkward that is, and then deciding to tell them, hey, take a deep breath and then relax your shoulders. Does everybody see the difference there between the two?
Right.
One seems very rigid, one seems very awkward. The other one is just a little bit more relaxed. Because if that's not how the person, that's not what the person gives me in conversation, I don't want them doing this. But if that person is very awkward and they're doing this the whole way through, yeah, I think that I'm going to try to have that in the image. Okay. Any other questions? You guys can ask anything that you want to.
Yeah, I have a question. When you're doing these like tight headshots,
Yes.
you have, I'm pretty new to photography. I'm just trying to learn. You have such beautiful like blurred backgrounds. What aperture do you typically shoot at for like these really, really tight headshots that you have?
So again, I like to say that it's about taking a risk. If I'm shooting with, right now on this D810, I have a 58 millimeter f1.4. Okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes I use a 50 millimeter 1.4, but this 58 I like because it has that little extra oomph. I'll shoot at 1.8 f2, you know,
Mhm.
f2.8 every once in a while. If I want to get a little bit more of that background in focus to add to the individual story, then f4, you know, or even
Mhm.
higher than that. But usually whenever it comes to those tight crops with that very shallow background, just above 1.4, so like 1.8 f2.
Oh, okay.
I don't like shooting at 1.4 all the time because it has that leaves for the tendency of everything being soft, and I don't want
Right.
everything to be soft. If you're close to the image and you're looking at that, you're like really scrutinizing it. So I like to be careful in that aspect, but I still like to push it. Okay.
How much
Mhm.
flash and/or what kind of flash do you use, if so?
I don't like using flashes. Like I used to do studio photography, but I don't like using flashes unless I really have to. And most of the time, whenever I'm shooting, it's natural or available light that's there, and I'm trying to make that work. But for example, this image isn't exactly the most technically sound image, but I really love it. And this is Rick Smith at Nietzsche's. Now, what I wish could have been there was a little bit more separation with Rick from the background, but
Yeah.
he's kind of being absorbed there because of the quality of light behind this door. But this is shot through the plexiglass of a door at Nietzsche's with the stickers like in the foreground and a little bit of that door frame there and him singing directly, you know, in the center. Okay. When it comes to light, I usually like to use that available light because it gives you that that real world understanding. And the way that I like to paint that picture, is everybody okay on time, by the way? I don't want to
Mhm.
too long. Okay. If you have to leave, then please leave. I promise I won't go too far over.
You can.
But when it comes to making an image,
And also, I'll jump in real quick, Vicente. Also, if you are, if you do need to go and you're on time, I am recording the class, and we will be sharing it at the Delaware Camera Facebook page. So.
Okay. So when it comes to like making an image, the way that I like to think of things in terms of light or what light I have available or using, this is going to be the romantic version of this. So bear with me, because if you guys don't want to really hear that BS, then I'm sorry. So if I'm traveling, and I usually like to travel alone, but if I'm traveling and I decide I'm walking around a town or a city that I've never really been to, you know, I'll look for maybe a bar or a club, like a dance club or something that is kind of mellow, maybe somewhere that is worse for wear, that doesn't exactly look like the type of place that you want to spend all of your time. And I'm going to go in so I can understand the environment, I can understand the people, and since it's not exactly as bustling as like a big time club or a big time bar, now I get to make observations, and I get to talk to people that are there, and I like to feel the warmth of the place, and I try to understand how, you know, that red light might have an effect on you whenever you're trying to drink a beer or a cocktail. And if they have bad cocktails, that really gets me to understand the place even more, because this is just a joint that people go to just hang out. They're not really there for quality. They're hanging out there for, you know, presence. So whenever I'm going into a place like that, I'm thinking about how the light sets that mood as well. And if I go into a place like that and it's very brightly lit, almost like fluorescent, I mean, that can look kind of odd. That could look very eerie. That might make for a good picture. But if you have moody lighting, it builds something towards the story that I don't want to mess with. So if I use a flash at that moment, that might inhibit what a viewer might get out of that story. And I'm always looking for something that is very intriguing, as well as mysterious or eerie, or like bordering on a little uncomfortable. Because if you also noticed a lot of my pictures, I'm making sure that individuals are looking straight at you. A lot of the time I'm looking for that. And then for more environmental portraits, I'm making sure that I'm capturing exactly what that individual is doing, as if you're looking through a vignette, and you're the voyeur in that situation, you know. So you have to put yourself in the mindset of being an individual who is there to observe, but also build rapport and establish a connection with someone that you don't know at all, or all the people there, to the point where they don't pay attention to you, but they're willing to pay attention to you. And I hope that doesn't sound pretentious, but it's the attempt of observing and being invisible while still being able to interact. You know, yeah, that's That's just how I think about it, especially when it comes to light, and light plays a big role because of that moodiness.
Thank you.
Let's find another one here. Light in this image. This is natural light. This is blue hour. Like the sun is pretty much past that horizon. All you're getting is that little extra bit of orange and yellow, and those purple, and pink hues that are behind them. This image, like, I absolutely adore. And it's of two people who don't know me whatsoever that I decided to go up to and ask if I can make a photograph. And they told me their story. They've been together for 7 years. This is Kufi and Emily. Been together for 7 years. They love each other very much. He goes to school for criminal justice. Like, they were more than happy to just sit for a photograph while looking the way that they did, just being completely like neutral in expression. They laughed a couple of times, and I love the laughter images, but those laughter images are for them. For this image, this look that they gave me, this is perfect. That's what you go with. Go ahead, Linda.
Vincent, do you ever give people pictures that you take of them?
Yeah.
That's nice.
I do like to keep in touch with some people. Some people I'd rather not keep in touch with, but I'm still okay with sending them their image. Yeah, I like the fact that some people like getting a picture of themselves. So I do usually like to send a picture. I've learned something though. If you guys want a quick tip, I should have been thinking about this years ago, but I've learned to start offering prints instead of the file, the digital image file. Because even though it's low res, even though it's a low res file that I may send, every once in a while I'll slip up and I'll send a high res file, and essentially you can do whatever you want to with that image from then on. If you send a print, someone has the image that you made of them. They're happy with that, but at the same time, they won't be using it for everything that they want to. Like, they put it on a flyer, and then you end up, you have it on a billboard, the next day, or your image is on a T-shirt. It's like, oh no, my image is everywhere now. You have to worry about things like that. So yeah, I've been getting into the habit of trying to print my images for the individual that I made the photograph of. Any other questions? Any at all?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
When you're sending people the files, even though they're low res, are you watermarking them?
Is this Laura?
It is.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just can't see you because there's a thumb like in the way or something.
Sorry.
No, it's cool. Don't worry about it. Am I watermarking them when I send them the images? So Mark and I had a conversation about this a long time ago. Even though I don't want my images to exactly show up on a T-shirt, without my consent, I don't really care when it comes to watermarks. I mean, I think that that's a good thing to do if you're sending someone your image and you don't want them using it for everything. But if I print the image for a person or I send it to them, no, it's just the bare image.
Okay.
Now, if it's someone that I will say, there was a group that I ran into 2 weeks ago, and they were not exactly the nicest people in the world that I decided to make an image of because of the group that they were in. And they were very forward and saying a lot of really messed up things to me, but also asking me when they could have the image. I thought about putting my watermark right across that just to be funny when sending that over. It's like, here, take that. Yeah, no, usually I don't put my watermark on them whenever giving them to the person.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry for that long-winded answer. Any other questions? You guys can ask whatever you'd like. I got time.
If you are a super newbie, what would be a good camera that you would recommend?
Do you want to get into making pictures of people or just everything?
Everything, I think.
Okay.
Especially hair. I photograph a lot of hair. So.
Oh, nice. Okay, very cool. When it comes to
I'm a hairstylist.
making pictures,
I'm not a weirdo.
She just photographs hair.
Yeah.
When it comes to that, as far as I know, since I haven't worked at Delaware Camera in a little while now, I think the D3400 is still a very viable choice. Yeah. Or is it the 35, Stephen?
35. The 35 is there. The 34. Okay. It's a much bigger conversation about picking a first camera, and the questions that I would go down are how far do you want to go into it, and like what beyond just starting, and like what are your intentions beyond just starting. So like so Vicente's starting to shoot with his Fuji rangefinder there. I shoot with a Fuji, so like I'm biased towards Fuji quite a bit, but there's a lot of other smaller cameras now, mirrorless cameras, that can do a great job that aren't this big lug of a camera that Vicente has of the D810 and his monster lens, that you can get something much more compact that you can carry and travel with, like, and it's much less intrusive both into you and also into who you're photographing. So that's one of the things that I personally think about. I used to carry a giant camera like Vicente, and I don't anymore. I carry a Fuji X-T3, and it's compact, and I have one bag. I have 3 lenses in it, and all of the lenses and everything, the camera and the lenses are the same size as the old camera alone that I was carrying. So there's a lot, like, definitely let's schedule a time. Either we can do a virtual store hours, and we can have a conversation about the different options of cameras that are out there.
You got that, Magda?
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Wrote it down.
Any other questions, anybody?
Vicente, I have another camera question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure, please.
I was just getting settled. I joined a little bit late when you were talking about the cameras that you use, and I heard you mention that you use the X Pro 3, which is a rangefinder style. Can you just talk about the difference between that and a DSLR? Because I have a D750, but the rangefinder kind of sounded interesting. I just kind of missed a little bit of it.
So, okay, when it comes to this this rangefinder style X Pro 3, it's a mirrorless camera, number one, which is the biggest difference between the DSLR and this guy. Mirrorless meaning that it has no internal mirror for a prism because it doesn't need a prism. You're looking straight through a window rather than looking through a prism that reflects off of a mirror. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now that allows the camera to be much more compact. It's number one. Okay. Mm-hmm. Number two, it's a lot quicker shooting as well. Just because the shutter goes over my sensor. Actually, I don't want to open it up to show you the sensor because you know what a sensor looks like. But the shutter just goes directly over my sensor, and as soon as I start laying my finger down on that shutter release button, it snaps away. Okay. The other pro to having a rangefinder camera is just the fact that since it's so small, it's it's inconspicuous, and it isn't as intimidating to anybody that I decide to make a photograph of. You know, if most of you are having a picture being made by me of you, you probably don't exactly enjoy something like this being in your face, especially if you're not someone that has to, if you are someone that has to explain yourself all the way through making the image. Let's say if you don't have the credentials like Chris was talking about, this is kind of intrusive to an individual, but it's about trying to make them more relaxed and comfortable with you being there. With this, they don't feel as intimidated a lot of the time. That's what I've been noticing. And people are much more apt to give me themselves whenever I decide to make a photograph of them with the rangefinder style, since it's so much smaller. Okay. Now, the other thing about the X Pro 3 that, like the Leica cameras, it does have a retro feel to it. You know, there is a shutter dial that's on the top. There is also an exposure compensation dial here. You know, you can switch your aperture on the lens ring right here, which are all wonderful aspects of a camera. But if you're not used to using something like that, it may be a little overwhelming. At the same time, being uncomfortable is a really good way to get better. Okay, that's my opinion. The reason why I say that is because if you're uncomfortable with using all these aspects of the camera, now you're forcing yourself to take your time with every image that you're making, and you're going to get better at making images while being patient. Okay. So so this kind of reminds me, not to get too touchy-feely, but this kind of reminds me that a friend of mine just recently, who was also a colleague at Locust Street Art, just passed away. His name is Ken Morgan. Okay. And Ken Morgan was a fantastic photographer in Buffalo for 40 years, over 40 years. His philosophy was essentially everybody should learn how to shoot on black and white film with an analog style camera. And I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Not exactly just black and white film. Black and white helps you learn how to develop, which helps you understand shadows and highlights. But it's more so learning how to shoot on an analog camera makes you take the time. to figure out how you want to construct your image. Now, if you're someone who's just beginning, there's nothing wrong with using a digital camera. And there's also nothing wrong with understanding that you don't want to be uncomfortable the whole time that you're making a picture. You want it to be therapeutic. You want to be able to just make the picture and go. That's fine. But to me, the biggest difference between having this rangefinder and a DSLR is the compactability and how easy it is to use with an individual who might be scared otherwise of what you're going to be doing with that image. Remember, a lot of this is psychological. If I decide that I'm going to be making an image of somebody with a really big camera, let's say I had a medium format camera, chances are they're going to be much more uncomfortable the more that I go through making images of them with that and not explaining to them what I'm doing the whole time. Okay. And when I do it with this, it's a lot more relaxed of a situation. Okay. So think about the aspect of, like, the psychological effect that you have on an individual when you're making an image of them like that as well. Now, being someone who's been making images since I was 12, if I decide to bring a medium format camera that's the size of 2 bricks, as long as I explain to them what I'm doing the whole time, they get interested, and now they're a little bit more at ease with what's going on. But if you're using something big in their face the whole way through, chances are someone's going to feel a little out of sorts.
Okay. Did you say the viewfinder on a rangefinder lets you see more of the scene too?
Okay. So with the viewfinder, again, I'm looking straight through a window. What I'm doing right now is optically seeing you. Okay. I can just see you straight through a window. The cool thing and the difference between the DSLR and this particular rangefinder style camera is that there's this little switch here. As soon as I flip that, you're going to notice that my viewfinder gets covered up. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
It's gone electronic now. Like, it's an electronic viewfinder. So I can see exactly what my exposure and my image is going to look like as I adjust.
Oh.
It can go from optical, where you're just looking through a window, or to EVF. So optical, EVF.
And the advantage of going through the window with straight analog as opposed to digital is what? Because there's like an offset if you're close to the person between what the lens is looking at, what you're looking at, or not?
That's the cool thing about this too. It corrects for parallax.
Okay.
So it corrects for that offset, which is really nice. It shows you where your image is going to be. But if you want to talk about, like, the philosophical advantage too of looking through it optically, looking through a window is fantastic, because if you want to put yourself in the mindset of making that image, first I'm going to say this, how you can compare it is this. You wake up in the morning and you tell yourself you're going to have a good day, chances are you're going to have a better day than you thought. Okay. If you tell yourself immediately that you're going to have a good day and you smile about it, chances are it's going to be a little bit better. Just like whenever you're doing a workout that really sucks and you smile during that workout and you say something like, I love this, chances are you're going to do a little bit better and you're going to want to do more. Okay. If you just lie to yourself the whole way through, I love this shit, this is great, it's going to turn out a little bit better. But when it comes to making photographs, if I'm looking through that window, essentially what I'm doing is I'm spotting, I'm being that voyeur, I'm being that person that's looking directly at a scene opening up directly in front of them, with only a window in my way. So I'm looking through a window of whatever happens in life, and that makes it much more fun and enjoyable whenever I'm taking a picture. So there is an aspect about this that makes making photographs even more fun than when I was just using the DSLR. I've been finding that since I ordered this a month ago, I've used this 90% of the time in the last month. Not even worrying about the fact that it is a crop frame image rather than a full frame image. I've loved this. So yeah, it's just fun.
So I was going to ask about the percentages, which you obviously gave, and I didn't know if you woke up and said, hey, today I'm shooting with my Fuji, or today I'm going to carry my Nikon, or if it's based on whether you're traveling or, the kinds of people you're going to try to meet, whether you're bringing one or the other.
That's okay. So since we're all dealing with this pandemic right now, which pretty much blows, since we're all dealing with this pandemic, the one thing that I've been thinking about is the first travel excursion that I'll go on. What I probably do is I will bring the D810, but I'm also going to bring the X Pro 3, and I'll bring a film body with me as well. If I'm making structured images as I'm going along through a new town or new city, I will be using the 810. If I'm deciding that I'm going to take a step outside and just walk around, and if I happen upon something, I'm going to make some photographs, I'm bringing the X Pro 3. So that means that if I decide that I'm going to a bar for the night, not to drink, but just to find people, I'm going to bring the X Pro 3. If I want to go to a music club, I'm going to go with the X Pro 3. If I'm driving around and I see that there's someone that's very interesting on the corner of a street, I'll park a little ways down, I'll gallivant over to them, and then I'll start my spiel of, hey, do you mind if I make a portrait photograph of you? So yeah, I'll definitely bring both. But this is what I'm definitely using to make sure that I'm getting the images of spontaneity that I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? No?
Good.
All right. So for those of you that aren't familiar, my website is Vicente Rondon Photo, or I'm sorry, just VicenteRondon.com. My Instagram is Vicente Rondon Photo. All right. If you guys have any questions at all, this might sound insane, but I actually like doing this because it's fun for me. You can email me at Vince, even though that's not my name,
Yeah.
VINCE, Vince Rondon @gmail.com. I love getting questions from people. Okay. Other than that, if you want to take a look at my Instagram, you can do that. On my Instagram, as opposed to my website, which I will start doing on my website, on my Instagram, I do post captions for each individual or set of individuals that I photograph. That way you can get a little story out of that. If you guys have any further questions about equipment that I use or how I go about making my images, you can ask anytime. Hopefully I can do this again. I really love talking about making images, and hopefully I get to see you guys in person again sometime soon. But if there's no further questions, I'm going to leave it over to Steven and see where we go from there.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Vicente, thank you very much.
This is wonderful.
Yeah,
Glad
this
to
is
get
great. And yeah, everybody, thank you everyone for joining the class. These have been fun. We've been put a bunch together. We've got part 3 in our series with Doug Hansgate next week, bringing it all together. That's been a really interesting conversation. The one thing that Doug leaked to me, or I think we even talked about it in last class, was one of the things that he's set up is he shoots, or he advises people set up your viewfinder so that you're shooting in monochrome. And so that lends back to what Vicente was just saying of Ken Morgan talking about everybody should learn black and white film, analog camera. Even if you're capturing an image in color, but when you're viewing it and looking at it and composing and focusing and paying attention to the light, color becomes a distraction. So I'm not sold on that concept yet, but I'm excited for the class. That class is next week on Wednesday at 8. The links are definitely at Delaware Camera on our Facebook page, and we'll send a follow-up email with links to that if you're not already registered for that class. But if you have ideas of any other classes or any other topics that you'd like us to cover, definitely please share those with us. We're happy to try and find a resource, somebody who has some insight into those things. Certainly Vicente, street photography, portrait photography is clearly well accomplished in those areas. But Laura.
Would you guys be open to doing a critique on photos?
Yes. Sorry, I can't speak for Steven. Yes. I don't say that because I get joy out of making people hurt. That's not what I'm about. Like that's not what this is. It's just that I love giving critiques because it is very helpful.
Yeah.
It's extremely helpful.
Yeah, let's do it.
Can learn from it.
Yeah, I will work on scheduling a couple of open critiques, and maybe we can schedule, like, people can sign up for some time slots, and we'll get some different experts in to participate in the critiques. But certainly I think Vicente has just volunteered himself right there.
I'll do it. You know why? Because I love you guys. And on top of that, I want to know that you guys are enjoying image making as well as becoming better photographers. So yeah, absolutely. You guys are really cool, by the way. I really do appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much. And also thank you for supporting the class for the Ride for Roswell.
Yeah, I did that.
Like that's awesome too. So thank you guys. There's a lot of pain and hurt going on in the world right now, and it's really awesome to have some people that are being supportive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicente.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining. Again, Vicente, thank you so much. And I'll be in touch to schedule some critiques, and I think maybe another class as well next month at some point.
Sounds good.
Oh, great.
I look like I held this class in a cave. Look at how oily I look. This is awesome.
You look great.
Your hair never moves.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in there. But I just noticed, I'm like, man, I look like I'm in prison.
You need to take that X Pro 3 and turn it into a very expensive webcam.
I'm gonna do that. Because this is not working. It looks like I'm sending people a message for the resistance. You know, like that's so this looks like. All right, guys. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.